Greetings, everyone. I wasn't planning to film another video today. I was planning to either relax or do cans and bottles. If you're wondering why my hair looks a certain way, I just got out of the shower and it was wonderful. Just something about the heat hitting the skin. I can't explain it. Okay, on to business. Because I occasionally do research on behalf of the Gynarchy community, I am always interested in people's reactions to the topic uh, and any associated terminology, ideas, what have you. That led to the creation of this video. The title is What Factors could influence a person's interest in the topic of Gynarchy. So first we have preconceived notions of what it is. Some people, their first impression is, oh, that's reverse patriarchy. They don't do any research. They just look at their society, think, oh, that's the way it's always been, and then they imagine it reversed. Some also have the preconceived notion that Gynarchy is simply a fetishistic idea, that it is a byproduct of a fetishist's mind. It is merely some kind of sexual fantasy that they are engaging in, and not something that is to be taken seriously at all. Then there are individuals who try to attach utopia onto Gynarchy. They think Gynarchy would be some kind of utopia, and I don't know of any serious Gynarchist who would ever consider Gynarchy to be such a thing, only that it would solve certain problems and there would always be others. However, this is a persistent reaction that some individuals have had to the community to the idea over the years. They've thought, oh, well, people think it's just going to magically fix all our problems. And they dismiss it on the basis of their preconceived notion that a Gynarchy, again, in their minds, we believe it's a utopia. And they think that anyone who has a utopian mindset or who desires a utopia is crazy, and therefore not only are those people worthy of dismissal, but so is the idea, so is the very word. The next thing is position versus action. This is what happens when a person holds a position yet not taking action. And sometimes the reason why that is they just haven't they could be in a transition period. They might not have even had enough time to think about it, or maybe they don't think the topic is worthy of any serious in-depth thought. And so I've seen this before. I've observed it in some individuals who have no activism under their belt, and yet when I mention it on the phone, when I talk about it, some of them have very visible reactions like, yeah, that's the way it should be, or woohoo! That was a librarian's reaction to it, like woohoo, about time or something. So I have seen individuals who would take that position, and yet there is no action to go along with that. And that factor could definitely influence someone's interest in the topic. If they have the position, but not necessarily any deep-seated beliefs or thoughts attached to the position, there's no action. And if there's no action beyond the position, your level of interest might be lower. The next one is personal affairs, jobs, passion projects, relationships. In other words, you're so busy you don't have enough time to even think about it or flesh your thoughts out on a piece of paper or a journal. This really doesn't need to be, I don't think I need to go into this too much. The next on the list is the lack of perceived legitimacy. And then a couple of follow-up questions. Why do people regard some concepts as legitimate? What lends a subject legitimacy? Political representation related to the topic does provide legitimacy for ideas and concepts because it's attached to most of the time, a power dynamic. And if these concepts and ideas, when channeled through a party, well, so not channeled, but when people with these thoughts and ideas form a party, that party then can shape public policy, can shape discourse in their country. And when you can shape both of these things, your ideas, your thoughts, they acquire relevance in that society. And people who, if you don't have some kind of political representation, there are many individuals who will look at it and go, well, how is it relevant to my life? I mean, great, you want a Gynarchy or whatever, a community run by women, but where's the relevance? Where are the parties? Where is the political talk? Where are the people getting in board meetings discussing it? Where is it? And some human beings will literally lose interest in a topic just based on that alone. If they don't feel that it's relevant to the political system that exists today or the structure, they think that it's not. Some people believe it's literally impossible. Some human beings have actually come up to me and say, oh, most women don't like this, as if they've met most women. It's an absurd thing to even claim in relation to this idea because it's not a fair assessment of what's going on in people's heads. I know for a fact that's not true based on my research alone, because I actually did research and I found out there's a lot more women and there's a lot more women who have or want this than not. And the reason why it might seem otherwise is because either the people are who are saying this stuff are deliberately lying, or the women are withholding their true thoughts and feelings out of fear, which I'll get more into later. But yeah, if there's no party, no policy positions, nothing to really chew on or think about. And also, this is important too, is if you are as a woman, they're not benefiting from this idea in any kind of way. Like, policy does matter. So if your health, your safety, your well-being, if nothing if this topic isn't affecting you positively, why would you consider it relevant at all? Why would you take any level of interest in it beyond maybe curiosity? I could see people dismissing it on that basis. Then you have the existence of academic subjects taught at all levels. If a subject it gains entry into the academic world, that by itself grants it legitimacy. Mathematics and science and many other subjects have gained their legitimacy not only through the academic world, but through the rigor. In other words, the level of papers done on the subject, the research going back hundreds, thousands of years. There is a long, great past of science and mathematics. In particular, they're some of the longest existing subjects. Now, other subjects have gained more traction in recent years. We didn't used to have classes on women's studies and gender studies. We didn't used to have classes on other people's cultures, and yet they've been given the permission by the academic institutions to discuss and talk about them. And so, but that just begs the question: where is the Gynarchy academic subject? Where is the matriarchy academic subject? If you don't have an academic subject associated with the topic, there's less legitimacy. People aren't going to take it as seriously. Now, when you talk about women's studies, people take it seriously when they care about women, when they want to learn about their issues. But if you're talking about something like this, Gynarchists don't have that. We don't have an academic subject associated with the topic that we're all interested in, and therefore we are granted less legitimacy as a result of it. Then the next one is the variation of subtopics generated by the main. So if you are just being introduced to the topic for the first time, you might not understand how many other subjects are actually involved in discussions about Gynarchy. It may not even occur to you. And if you don't see the connection that Gynarchy has to many different subtopics, if you can't even fathom what that would be, well, it's like, how much engagement can you actually have beyond the topic itself? And do you feel that there's anything engaging about those thoughts and feelings in the first place? If you think it's not a big deal, right then and there your interest wanes. There's also the next factor is the popularity of male-run societies and religions. So these obviously, because of how popular they still are, because of the like literally billions of followers of these societies, of these religions, it is extremely difficult. And this is probably the primary. There are so many people who say, "Oh well, male rule is inevitable." Like they act as if this is the end game for the human species. That no matter what happens, men are going to run things right up until the end. No ifs, ands, or buts. I have seen women on different websites argue this position. I have seen men obviously argue for it. And if people buy into the idea that male-led societies and of course the religions, if those are the penultimate final chapter in human relations, sorry, not human relations, but in human society, that there is no other way it can be, why would you take an interest in something when so few people seem to? Why, like, if you care about popularity, if you care about how prevalent an idea is or a set of ideas are, and then you're hearing about something for the first time that maybe only a few thousand people or so are actually taking very seriously around the planet, that could dissuade your level of interest. It's like, well, I don't know how else do I want to put it. That's what I was thinking off the top of my head. The next one, the final one for this, is the groups who discuss it and the depth of those discussions. So if you go to like the wrong group and it ends up being like a really fetishy group, and the depth of those discussions are strictly about power dynamics, in other words, how women can lord power over men. Um, Here are just a few examples of this. If you go on, like there could be a guy writing out a constitution where women have stripped away all these rights for men, and there's something about this, about all of these different privileges being taken. That is the emphasis of the focus. But notice, of course, that the health, well-being, safety, research for women and girls, all of that is absent. That's going to make a hell of an impression upon you in relation to your interest of the topic. Because if you're going onto the worst possible group and all they're talking about is some kind of weird fantastical other world where men are carrying women around on their backs or something, or there's like some, like men are acting like horses, it's like a horse carriage deal where the men are dragging the women along, you know where women are using their authority in a very vicious or violent way. All of this is going to make a very nasty first impression because it's all male centered, it's male oriented. It has nothing to do with bettering women and girls' lives in any way, shape, or form. And that could make somebody lose interest almost immediately. If they see that shit, they're like, okay, and they keep seeing it over and over, like they see it multiple times across different platforms, that could be a huge turn off. And of course, the depth of those discussions matters as well. If they're not having, if there's not enough, if there's not enough depth, in other words, if people are just like touching the very surface of these concepts, but they're not going into any real detail, there's not a lot to really talk about. So you end up just reverting back to the original topic in some way. The next one, apologies, I'm trying to keep myself on track. The next factor involved is the anti-Gynarchist bias. Now, what is this? The anti-Gynarchist bias is it's kind of like a set of biases or biases. I don't remember which one's the correct one. That individuals have towards women being in positions of leadership or authority. The first one is a bad relationship with women in your personal life. So some human beings have this tendency, when they are treated badly by women in their personal life, to make the wrongful association that that's how all women are. And I know somebody could try to toss it back and say, well, what about the men? My argument has never been that one man represents all men. That's not a Gynarchist argument. A Gynarchist argument would be women in general tend to be better at not committing these crimes than men. So When you're talking about, like with Gynarchy, we compare groups of people to each other. We're not comparing individuals. But this is a very human thing, and it can cut both ways. Where you are, you have, let's say you have like a mother or a woman family member who is suffering from a severe personality disorder, and they treat you badly. Some people think it's just this is just how women are. It's not. It's the disorder that is influencing the behavior. It's not women. It's a very specific personality disorder that's causing the trouble. And people have a tendency to let their personal experiences rule their opinion of people that they've never even met, they don't even know. And it is unfortunate that sometimes when you have a bad person, sometimes bad people have a tendency to attract other bad people in their life, therefore reinforcing negative biases that you may have about women in your life, and think that, oh, well, if they just had the opportunity to, they would abuse the hell out of everyone, or they would hurt everyone. This isn't correct. This is a very specific bias that many men have fallen into and suffer from because they refuse to differentiate between personality disordered individuals and women as a group. There is no distinction in their mind between these two individuals. They are the same to them. Then there is the lack of education on matriarchal societies. So I'm glad I got to this. It's kind of like this, right? If you don't know what a matriarchal society is and you're introduced to the concept, that's going to be a problem because you have no frame of reference other than your own society to think about. And if you've never seen the alternative or never know it, to you it might just be some kind of thought that a person whipped out of thin air. And if you don't have, if there's no like source for this content, if there's no inspiration for this thought, somebody is going to may just come away with the impression that it's like, well, this isn't based on anything. This has no strong basis. It has no societal basis, no cultural basis. There's no foundation for this thought process that I would consider strong. That's how somebody could think of it. And the next one is androcentric propaganda. If you don't know what I'm referring to, there has been an effort in many recent years to try to portray and put on screen as many like women who can be bad and terrible as men kind of thing. Like there's all these women who are villains, and people come away with the wrongful impression based on what they're consuming in cartoons and television, whatever, that the women are just as bad as the men as a group. This is not true. This is what I would refer to as androcentric propaganda. It is an attempt by men and some male sympathizers to equate the two as if they are the same, while dismissing or ignoring FBI statistics that have been and research that has been conducted on this subject. We know already. The data does not reflect what Hollywood is producing, what other companies around the world are suggesting or saying. They are not both equally bad. Some people will try to play games and say, oh, well, maybe they're just bad in different ways, like women use proxies or whatever. First of all, there's two things you need to keep in mind about this and why it's nonsense. First of all, how do you calculate a proxy? Actually, there's three. How do you calculate which women are using a proxy for their violence? Actually, four. Fuck it. Two, aside from how to calculate who's being used as a proxy, how do you know which men are not being used as proxies and are just acting of their own volition? It's an attempt to try to absolve men of responsibility for the violent actions they take by shifting the burden of blame onto women. That's really what's going on here. They don't want men to be held accountable for anything because they are male-centric. And so they try to blame the women for it and make the assumption that women are just causing all of the male violence, actually. It's not really the men, it's the women doing it, which there's no evidence to support that claim at all in general. And so that's part of the problem. But then beyond proxies, you have to have the third problem, which is why wouldn't women do it themselves? Right? We're not living in the Stone Age anymore. We're not living in the time where in order to defend your land or defend people, like there was a time when women were quite literally defenseless against majority men because men were generally physically stronger than women due to socialization, due to their genetics, their biology. And so there was a time where if a man came with a sword or armor or whatever, that was it. Like, what was a woman going to do? She wasn't going to be able to stop him physically. That time, that was relevant for hundreds of years. If a strong man came along and he was taller, bigger, whatever, he could do whatever he wanted, and that was the horrifying existence for women at those times. But we're not living in a day and age where women can't do it anymore. Women are more educated today. They know more about poisons. They could literally slip something in their drink and kill you, and you wouldn't even know it. Not only that, they have access to firearms themselves. They could pop you if they wanted to. They could kill you and it wouldn't matter. Sorry, it would matter. I apologize. But what I'm saying is proxies don't matter when you have the ability to carry out an act of violence yourself. They act as if like women are these helpless creatures who need men to do everything for them. No, they don't. No, they don't. Women could very easily buy a firearm or get a one without some kind of serial number and just whack you if they really wanted to. But the problem, of course, is I think there's a misunderstanding about why women engage in violence versus why men do. This whole proxy bullshit totally leaves this factor out. Whenever men talk about it, it's like, well, women are weaker, therefore they don't do this violence. It's not about being physically weak or strong. Most human beings can hold a gun in their hand and pop another person. The issue is, do you want to kill somebody? And for most women, it's, no, we don't want to kill you. The other problem with the proxy argument is these people act as if Charles Manson didn't fucking exist. Like, there aren't men using other men and other women as proxies for their own violence. This happens regularly. Politicians in recent years have done this. They incite people into violence for them. What the fuck? They act like this is a women's only exclusive sport. Are we forgetting about Charles? Are we forgetting about January 6th? Are we forgetting about the whole like referencing Game of Thrones trial by combat shit that Giuliani was saying? Are you really going to suggest that women are the only ones who try to get other people to fight their battles for them? Are you out of your goddamn mind? Because that's not what goes on. Both men and women use proxies for their violence. It's not a women's exclusive fucking sport, okay? And we know because we saw Donald doing it. We saw Giuliani doing it. We've seen Charles do it. And we've seen cult leaders do this throughout history. And many cult leaders have been males. And what they do is they program people and they incite them to violence, and then they watch back, and then they play the deniability game. Like, oh, I didn't tell them to go kill anybody. But they use violent language. They also say things like, if you don't do this, you're not going to have a country anymore. So they get people angry. They incite the violence. They use those people as a proxy, that they don't want to do it themselves, because obviously if they did, they'd be in huge trouble. Donald and Giuliani, none of these individuals are actually going to grab a firearm and start shooting their political opponents. They're going to get other people to do it for them, whether it's by way of manipulation or not, or just a straight up order. So this is absurd. These people are literally implying in these discussions that it's somehow a women only enterprise. It's not. That's ridiculous. But I think if, in addition to all of this, why would a woman maybe want to have a guy kill another guy? What did that guy do? Because generally speaking, women don't get involved in violence. Like, my mother and sister are not waking up in the morning thinking about killing a guy. Most women I've met that doesn't even cross their minds. So what would compel or motivate a woman to be so fucking psychotically angry at another guy that she would feel the need to hire an assassin or to encourage somebody to do it? What did he do? I always have that thought on my mind. Because in order to get to that degree, in order to get to that point where you are ready to risk jail time or whatever, the other person must have done something to really piss you off. And it could potentially be abusive, illegal, whatever. And I have a tendency to be very critical of men, especially when they do shit like that. Because they do abuse privacy and closed doors. They do try to play mind games with people. And of course, naturally, every once in a while they get burned because one of those women doesn't want to take it anymore. Am I saying that all women are innocent? No, I'm not. Am I saying all women don't kill are killing people because they've got a reason. Sometimes it's just malicious in nature. So I'm not saying that everybody's innocent, but there is a difference between these two groups if you study criminal statistics. All right, so here's the next one. This video went way past where it was supposed to go. Okay, I'm gonna have to go to part 2. Crap. See you in part 2, everybody.